Ryan, what's on your radar?
So yesterday, Senator Kyrsten Sinema let us all know, through anonymous lobbyists of course, that she wasn't really feeling this whole idea of raising taxes on the super rich or raising taxes on corporations just in order to pay to reduce child poverty or invest in clean energy to combat climate change. Nope, not interested. So Democrats are now looking for other ways to raise revenue in case Sinema doesn't change her mind, which, who knows, she might not. It's anybody's guess. For her part, she's been telling colleagues that she really will get to a deal soon enough, and she doesn't plan on blowing the whole thing up. But one thing's clear. By the end of it, she and Joe Manchin will have taken a huge chunk out of the legislation and deprived Democrats of the chance to find out what might happen electorally if they actually delivered in a big way on their promises for once. They'll have another shot at reconciliation right before the midterms next year. And if they go with a one-year extension of the child tax credit, that'll be a real fight. But this was the moment to go really big. Sinema might be on the young side for a senator, less than half the age of some of her colleagues, but she represents the party's past. Think of her and Manchin as dead hands reaching out of the grave, grabbing at the party as it tries to move on from them. They might drag the party down this time around, but the reality is that their time has passed, and that's clear. And the way you can see this most directly is in dollar terms. So my last book was called We've Got People, and the title was a reference to this viral campaign ad from 2018.
This race is about people versus money. We've got people, they've got money.
One of the themes of the book was that starting with the Howard Dean race in 2004, it started to look possible that a candidate funded by small dollars could compete with one funded by the rich and corporations, because technology was making it possible for people to quickly translate their enthusiasm not just into a honk and wave on a highway overpass, but into actual money. Barack Obama then showed that was possible in 2008, but he also raised an insane amount of money from Wall Street. And once in office, he brushed aside people and went with the big money. Then in 2016, Bernie nearly toppled the Clinton machine with his endless supply of famous $27 contributions. In 2018, the small donor revolution spread to normie Democrats, with anti-Trump resistance Dems throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at congressional Democrats, enabling them to retake the House. In 2020, they did it again and took both the House and Senate. One of the people who noticed this shift was Chuck Schumer. Once known as Wall Street Chuck, but thanks to all these small donors, he now goes by Majority Leader. A lot of people have chalked up Schumer's pivot toward progressives as fear of a primary challenge from AOC, and no doubt that's part of what's going on. But what's also happening is that Schumer is used to delivering for donors so that they keep the spigot flowing. And Schumer's donors are now rank-and-file Democratic activists throwing in $27 at a time. And what they want is to see Democrats fighting, so Schumer is happy to give them that fight. What Schumer also knows is that raising corporate money is not actually that efficient, because each one of these lobbyists or rich people require coddling, they demand intimate access, they want internships for their kids, they want a dinner and a speech and a photo and on and on and on. And that's even before you get to all the politically unpopular favors you have to give them. Small donors just want you to win and then deliver what you promised. They don't expect to ever meet you unless they're volunteering at a headquarters where you happen to stop by. And Sinema, this last fundraising quarter, showed just how true that is. For the last few months, we were treated to endless stories about Sinema skipping this or that important event to be at a fundraiser, and even skipping the country at one point to go to London to raise money. For all that trouble, Sinema broke her fundraising record. Here's how Politico put it. Okay, but that's a record since she became a senator. When she was running for the Senate, back when Democratic voters thought she was a progressive and wanted to help her flip a Republican seat, she raised $7 million in the third quarter of 2018. Okay, maybe you think that's some kind of fluke and 2018 was a special year and Democratic small donors are no longer fired up since Trump is out of office and kicked off of Twitter. Okay, let's check in on Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, who was totally fine with the full $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. He never griped about the major legislation in February. He's co-sponsored the labor reform legislation called the PRO Act, et cetera, et cetera. How'd he do in the last quarter? Kelly raised $8.1 million, while the Republican candidate expected to win the nomination raised just over $500,000. As a reminder, how much did Sinema raise?
$1 million.
Okay, you're thinking maybe Mark Kelly just has a ton more rich friends than Sinema. Well, the way to test that hypothesis is to look in the FEC at how many of the contributions were itemized, how many were unitemized, and how many were from PACs. Unitemized means it was less than $200. Those are small donors. And PACs are generally corporate PACs, but could also be labor unions. And Mark Kelly probably did well from them after sponsoring the PRO Act. So let's take a look. Sinema raised $914,000 from itemized contributions. Those are big donors. And just $31,653.71 from small donors. That probably came in from what's left of her email list from 2018. She also raised $192,000 from PACs. The guy in the meeting who responded to Dr. Evil had it right.
Don't you think we should maybe ask for more than $1 million? $1 million isn't exactly a lot of money these days.
No, it's not. And Mark Kelly knows that, because in the last 3 months, he raised $3.4 million from small donors, according to his FEC report. In other words, Kelly raised 3 times more than Sinema just from small donors, even while Sinema was making a corporate-loving spectacle of herself and traveling the world to raise money. Okay, you might think that's just an Arizona thing. Well, over in Georgia, Raphael Warnock raised $4.7 million from small donors in the third quarter, on his way to raising $9 million overall. All right, you think? Those are people who are pretty well known. What about a Senate nobody like Maggie Hassan, the New Hampshire senator up for re-election this cycle? Well, she raised $2.5 million last quarter, and more than $800,000 of that was from small donors. Okay, well, those people are all up for re-election in 2022, and Sinema isn't up until 24, so maybe she's taking it easy on the fundraising trail, you think. Better to compare her to somebody who's up in a swing state in 2024. Well, first of all, if you think Sinema's not working hard at fundraising, you're absolutely not paying attention. But even still, she's only barely doing better than the others. Tammy Baldwin is perhaps the best comparison, since she serves from Wisconsin, which Trump won in 2016, Biden won in 2020, and will be hotly contested in 2024 when she's up for re-election. The last quarter, she raised $640,000, about half of that from small donors, which would be 10 times the amount that Sinema raised from small donors. So if that's Sinema's game, selling out the entire Democratic agenda to do slightly better than Tammy Baldwin in the fundraising race, I guess congratulations are in order to her. But how did Sinema compare to a House member without a serious challenger? Let's take a look at that. AOC raised $1.6 million and change to Sinema's $1.1 million. Looking closer at the numbers, AOC raised more just from small donors than Sinema raised total from small donors, big donors, and PACs. The simple fact is that Sinema's style of fundraising just isn't the best way to raise large sums of money anymore. And politicians ultimately follow the money, which means there's now going to follow the people, especially if they're in swing states that millions of people care about. So if you believe that politicians are corrupt and only do what their donors tell them to do, that's actually good news about the future of the Democratic Party. Yet its past, however, still has a death grip on the present. And Robbie, actually...
Interesting, very interesting.
From a libertarian perspective, one guy that gets short shrift in my book, and maybe an amended version in the future, would be Ron Paul. Because his presidential campaigns and his congressional campaigns, his ability to collect money even through the mail at scale, kind of created a grassroots movement that really scared Republicans. We're like, what?
Yeah,
this is something.
It was so funny to watch. Yeah, I was a supporter, and even right wing media just like ignored him for years, for as long as they possibly could, even though his fundraising was killing everybody else. His straw poll results at CPAC and other places, he would win. Like, the people are demanding Ron Paul, and the news just like blackout coverage until they finally had to get on board with kind of a zanier, people-driven agenda.
Right, and the same thing would happen with Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely.
Where he would be raising all of this money, he'd be polling well, and his face would be there, in the pictures.
Yeah.
But all the conversation would be about all of the other people.
Yeah.
But one person who did notice this, Chuck Schumer.
Right.
Because now all of a sudden, his Senate candidates, Raphael Warnock, raising $9 million in the third quarter of the year before his. That's an extraordinary amount of money. When Sinema raised $7 million in the third quarter of 2018, which is different than raising that much in 2017, which is the year before. That was a huge record in Arizona at the time. And so small donors are now shattering records that were even set back in 2018.
I don't ultimately know how. I think it's a mix. I don't necessarily think it's just that when political figures raising money are just slaves to whatever their donors want. In many cases, it's, they feel this way, and because they feel this way, they attract donors who will support those causes.
Right.
So it does both ways.
Right, and it frees them to not have to do some of the things that they might not want to do. The problem for Democrats is going to be that in the beginning it was people who were giving every last cent to give $27. Now you have these middle and upper middle class people who can give $25 to 10 different candidates, and they can do that almost every month. These are not super rich people, but they're decently well off. They probably own a home. They're making more than $150,000, $200,000. And so you're going to start to see Democrats, I think, catering more to that middle and upper middle class. I think that's where you see a lot of this child tax credit and child care stuff. Thankfully, they're making it universal, so it applies to the poorest of the poorest, because you want them to benefit as well. But I think the middle and upper middle class are going to increasingly become a part of the Democratic Party's priority because of this.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, anyway, looking forward to what's on your radar next.